Well, blockbuster news on this Friday. Manchester City Xhaka banned from European competitions for 2 years, starting from next season, and fined €30 million, guilty of financial fair play breaches. Your thoughts?
Well, I'm not quite sure what to make of it. Listen, we've only just got this news ourselves, but there's so many layers to this. Manchester City, given their spending, you wondered how they balance the books, but by all accounts, certainly as far as they were concerned, or as far as they said, they'd done everything above board and everything was accounted for. Now, all of a sudden, you've got this evidence that was supposedly leaked. Turns out it was probably hacked by Rui Pinto, a Portuguese national, and that is the evidence that UEFA used in finding Manchester City guilty. Now, that may seem all straightforward, but as I mentioned, there's a number of layers to even that. If this were a criminal case, you cannot bring evidence that was illegally gotten into that case in trying to prove someone's, well, guilt or innocence. So as a result, that evidence would not be admissible. So now, but this is not a criminal court. What's the jurisdiction here? And what are these stipulations? That are questions that we need to find out soon.
So right now, there are far more questions than answers. Yes. And it's a developing story. But when we were upstairs in the newsroom and this broke, we both said to each other, first thing they're going to do is appeal. Let's take a look at the statement that Manchester City have put out, because they do have the ability, of course, to appeal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. They say they're going to do so at the earliest possibility. Now, they may do that quickly. This is not a process that will continue and be resolved quickly, though.
No, it won't. And you understand the approach of appealing and trying to bump it upstairs to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. At the very least, it buys you time to try to figure out what your next steps may be. It may buy you time in trying to balance your books a little bit more reasonably, and trying to offload some of your more expensive signings. And again, even that has layers to it. If you're on a cost-cutting exercise, if your intention is to go to the Court of Arbitration for Sport and say, look at what we've done over the last couple of years. Let's say it takes a couple of years to get that far. Let's look at what we've done over the last couple of years, how we've trimmed costs, how we've raised revenues. The questions then are, what players do you sell and to who, and who picks up their salaries? This man is oftentimes, the manager is the easiest to let go, because you can't let go of a whole squad, but we are talking about one of the best managers in world football, and is he the one that you let go to bring in somebody cheaper? Given the kind of I'll be kind in labeling it as miscommunication between Pep Guardiola and the ownership group at the Etihad, and what he was assured of, and now what apparently is the truth. How does he interpret that himself? Because he'll have no shortage of offers either.
Real Madrid are next in the Champions League. He wants to win it with City. If they get knocked out, whether it's by Real Madrid or before the final or in the final, he won't win a Champions League with Manchester City, at least for the next 2 years. Is he looking elsewhere?
I think so. Listen, in much the same way that we talk about players wanting to play in the Champions League, managers similarly want to manage in the Champions League. And regardless of his own history and how many times he's won it and all the accolades that he's won in competing in European competition, to be outside looking in is not a position for Pep Guardiola. How
many times on ESPN FC have we spoken about the race for the top 4?
A lot.
It's now a race for the top 5, because in essence, City are good enough most years to finish in the top 4. Top 4 spots get Champions League spots. Let's put this into perspective. Right now, if Manchester City, if we were in the summer and this happened, Sheffield United would get the 4th Champions League spot. So it's opened up the race. I mean, Chelsea and Spurs and Sheffield United and whatever, now 5th next season, because they're not going to take, from what we understand, a place away from England. Why should they? They're the ones that are getting punished.
And then whoever finishes 5th
gets a Champions League
gets
spot.
a nod. And again, what a carrot there is at the end of that stick. But as we keep saying, that just adds another layer onto this. If Manchester City win the Champions League this season, do they appeal or just take the 2-year ban and say, well, we've done what we wanted to do, Now let's just take a back seat. We'll stay out for 2 years. There's just so many twists and turns to this.
One of the other things, if the appeal process hasn't been heard thoroughly and we haven't got a resolution by the time the Champions League starts for next season, are they still in
They may be back in.
the Champions League?
So again, the question comes, who finishes fifth? And their whole summer in limbo. And how do you sell your club? Let's say you do finish fifth, and this is up in the air. Potentially, you're saying to players, well, we might be playing the Champions League. That's a totally different sell for clubs. I mean, the knock-on effect here is not just about Pep Guardiola or Manchester City. It's not just about the Champions League. There are so many layers to this that it's intriguing.
Finally, there's a lot more to come, and we'll have it all for you on ESPN FC. But the final thing would be on Manchester City. They have built what they hoped was going to be a dynasty. They've got some of the best players in the world. Is this now a house of cards for them or for others who've spent so much money?
No, I think it's still a little bit early to say that because they do have good financial backing, regardless of where that is sourced from. I think even without I have to be careful how I phrase this, even without any personal injection of wealth from the ownership, I think Manchester City can still compete and will still compete at the highest ends of not just English but European football.
Is this UEFA saying don't mess with us?
Yes, and I think they've been needing to say that for quite some time. Other clubs around Europe would also take note and probably sitting a little bit nervously right now.
It's a developing story. Catch all the latest on ESPN FC on YouTube or online.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN Plus.